In this episode, I work with a couple, Dawn and Patrick, on how to increase follow through and improve emotional intimacy at the same time. Welcome to the Dr. Wyatt Show, where developing a long lasting, happy relationship is the status symbol to achieve, and following my tools is one path to help get you there. I'm your host, Dr. Wyatt Fisher, a licensed psychologist specializing in couples counseling. If you want to improve your communication so that you have more love and less conflicts, download my app today, Keep the Glow, KTG, wherever you get your apps. Also, be sure to click the subscribe button so you're notified of future episodes, and follow me on social at Dr. Wyatt Fisher. So as mentioned, today is a free counseling session I provide to a couple, Dawn and Patrick. And in this session, as you're going to hear, we talk through how to increase his follow-through rate and how to improve their emotional intimacy at the same time. You're going to want to listen to the very end because that's when we really get into the solutions. Hope you enjoy it. So start me from the beginning. Just tell me a little bit about each of you individually, your history of your marriage, your relationship, and then we'll get into the one topic or more that you want to focus on for our time together.
Okay. I guess I'll start. I was married previously a long time ago. I was in that marriage for about 4 years. I met Pat after that, and him and I have been married. It was 25 years ago in June. I don't know what else.
We've been together for 28 years.
Okay.
And we have two,
two kids?
Yeah, 29 and 24.
Okay. And what do you guys do for work?
I handle insurance for architects and engineers.
And I work for a waste and recycling company.
Okay. Well, so what is the topic you want to start with today for what made you sign up for this?
Well, we've been really struggling. We've been in counseling now for almost 3 years. We've tried books, we've tried articles, we've tried therapy together, therapy individually. I'm kind of at my last attempt of trying. One of my biggest things that I'd like to talk about is I know you have several things about resentments in your podcasts, and a thing that I struggle with is how do you get past a resentment if the drainer continues to happen continuously? And by that, I mean, I'm usually the one that brings up fillers and drainers and working on the relationship and how can we get from winter to spring. And I suggest things to him. He says he'll do those, and then he doesn't follow through. And that makes my resentment build bigger and bigger every time he says he's going to, and he doesn't.
Okay. And before we talk further about that, just out of curiosity, what's been the focus in your 3 years of therapy together? That's a long time.
Everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything
Is a big one. Lack of intimacy, lack of emotional intimacy, lack of sexual intimacy, not doing things together, not being on the same page.
Okay.
You name it.
Yeah. Have you guys found your 3 years of therapy helpful or not so much?
I can't speak for you, but I did, but it's always met with a very defensive outcome on Patrick's side. He doesn't take criticism well, and he always feels like the therapist is beating him up.
Yeah, it never feels good to be singled out. And it is easy in couples therapy for one person to start getting singled out.
Correct.
So that makes sense. So
So
Patrick, what's that?
We stopped the couples because I thought it would make him feel more comfortable. We found Dr. Phil had a great podcast, and we started working on his book, and he really enjoyed that until he stopped and didn't follow through. And then I found you, And here
Okay.
we are.
Here we are. So Patrick, what's your side of this tendency to start and then not follow through? Or yeah, tell me your side. What's going on for you?
So for me, I came from a family to where we didn't express feelings. My mom and dad didn't never ask you how you're feeling. How are you doing? I have brothers and sisters. We were the same way. We never expressed feelings at all, especially deep down. We didn't do that. We didn't celebrate birthdays or, at Christmas time we got socks and underwear. So my family's kind of different where we didn't express feelings a lot, and it kind of takes over into what I see now in my life. So it's hard for me to express myself in doing that and communicate that and get it out to make it better for us. So
Yeah.
therapy has worked for me as far as sitting down and talking to her more instead of just brooding and then going in the other room and just let it not say anything. That's when it gets worse.
Yeah.
So I've come a long way since then. So basically it's for me, I'm not able to express deep down what I feel that she needs. And that's part of what's happening right now is like, I say I'm going to do it, but when I dig into the nuts and bolts of what we need to fix, I say I'm going to do it. And then I lack doing it.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, it's really common, especially for men, to struggle sharing their feelings. So you're not alone. That's really common for guys. But help me understand, how does that struggle of sharing your feelings connect to lack of follow through?
I don't know. That's kind of why we're at where we're at right now. It's like, I like doing it. I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just I started and then I can't stay with it. It's like
Yeah.
I focus on it for whatever reason. So now I got a big note right sitting on the table in front of me of what each daily thing that I do, the head and the heart that you talked about,
Yeah.
the filters and the drainers I got wrote down. So I have a big, thing in front of me now for me to do daily, not to turn on the TV at a certain time. So I think that's a good reminder for me to stick with it. I'm hoping that something triggers me to stay with it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And do you tend to be a routine oriented kind of person and highly conscientious, or not so much?
no, I'm a routine guy, definitely.
Okay.
Work and then do work around the house. Then we eat dinner. Then we watch TV, and it's kind of like the same old thing.
Yeah. Hmm. So
And
the
my
lack of, go ahead.
No, it's just like my parents were the exact same thing. They were married for 60 years and they went to the same restaurant and did the same thing and they never communicated and they never talked. And kind of that's where I'm at. So
Yeah. Yeah. So what's an example of something where you, Don, are frustrated that Patrick hasn't followed through? And you're like, he said he was going to do it and he didn't do it. Like, what's an example, just so I can understand better?
Well, when I found you, I discovered how many podcasts you had. And I said it'd be very helpful if you listen to some of your podcasts. And he said, okay, I'm going to do that. That sounds like a great idea. And then he didn't do it. So then the next time we come around to me bringing up talking and trying to resolve our issues, then I suggested, well, let's listen to them together. And he said, that's a great idea. And then he doesn't do it.
we did do a few though.
But you don't continue.
No, I do not continue.
Yeah. So what's in that scenario, that example, Patrick, for you, what made you not continue?
I don't know. And that's kind of where I'm stuck.
Well, what did you tell me the other day?
Um, my current therapist, when I do individual, says it might not because I'm not familiar with things. Like, I procrastinated on changing the shower head. After I did it, it was real quick. It was easy and I felt better. And I think
Yeah.
this is the same way. I'm not used to expressing my feelings. So it's hard for me to do that. It's just like,
Uh-huh.
I'll do it later. I'll do it later.
Okay.
It's just
Yeah.
procrastinate on.
And I guess, when I asked earlier, are you routine oriented? Another way I could have said that is, are you a procrastinator? Do you tend to procrastinate in general?
only on certain things, which I cannot figure out. That's the problem. There's only a few things that I procrastinate on. And
Yeah.
I don't, it's almost like a challenge for me. And then I brush it off and do the easier ones. And then I try to come back to the hardest one. And this is like the hardest one for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So like when you procrastinated on that shower head, what was going on there?
I thought it was going to be hard and literally took me 5 minutes. I took the old one off and I screwed the next one on. So,
Uh-huh.
but for whatever reason, I thought it was going to be a challenge and it took me a whole year to do something that took 5 minutes. For whatever
Yeah.
reason, I don't know.
Okay.
And
So
I know
there,
with this subject. So,
yeah. So there is a tendency to procrastinate on something that sounds or feels a little overwhelming or complicated. Is that right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to clarify too, what's the setup as far as like who's in charge of what for your marriage? Is it you guys like for you, Don, do you want to feel like we're both equally initiating things for a marriage, or it's mainly Patrick's responsibility or mainly my responsibility? Like what are the expectations with that?
My expectations are that I've worked on this for so long, for so many years. I'm asking him to step up to the plate. If you really want this to continue, you need to work on this.
Okay. Yeah. So you feel like you've done more than your fair share of initiating things that are good for the marriage, and you want to see Patrick put in at least the same level of effort.
Correct.
And then when you don't see that, you start feeling hopeless.
Correct.
Yeah. What's that do to you, Patrick, when you hear her say that? Does that motivate you, or do you feel like, she won't do anything? We've been together so long.
No, it motivates me because I don't want her,
Yes.
I want her to be happy. But the problem is I don't do it. I'm motivated to do it and I try to do it, but I don't stick with it. I'll plan a date here and there or, something to change things up or suggest, but I don't stay with it. I only do it for a short period of time or one time and then never again. So it falls by the wayside.
Yeah. And is that because it sounds overwhelming or complicated in those moments, or something else grabs your attention, or?
No, maybe laziness for us,
Okay.
probably.
Yeah.
One of your podcasts, late being lazy in a marriage. I think that's me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and that can happen, right? It's easy to fall asleep. It's easy to
Yeah.
just not care as much. It's easy to start neglecting the relationship, especially if it's not like an emergency or you're not real excited. Some people wrestle with consistency when it's not one of those two things. And I'm real excited when there's something in it for me, or it's a new relationship, or it's gonna be really fun. And now like the natural motivators kicking in, or it's an emergency. My partner just left. Like they're leaving me. We're getting a separation, and now I'm paying attention. Now it's an emergency. So
Mm-hmm.
some people struggle really getting traction unless it's really like exciting or it's an emergency. Can you resonate with that, or what do you think? Does that fit for you, or how would you edit that?
No, I can see that's why I'm doing this is kind of an emergency. So, that's why I'm doing this. Maybe something will trigger me to stay with things and go all in. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's in your interests? Like with all these things you could be working on in the marriage, what are the things that you want to see better in the marriage that would benefit you?
I want to see this better as well because if she's happy, then I'm happy.
Right, but
So, I'm
okay.
not happy because she's not happy. So
Uh-huh.
it around, there's triggers. She triggers me, then I trigger her by not doing something, then I trigger her, and then she triggers me,
Sure.
and for me, when we do talk, it's more. I'm a non-conflict person, and I don't like conflict, so I kind of brush it under the rug, and that's a big problem. I mean, in your podcast, you stated that as well. You need to
Yeah.
bring out and do your resentments, and I'm not the person that was doing that, so I
Yeah.
kept everything in, and then I can't do that because then I start drawing resentment against her. But in the meantime, I'm making it worse for her because I'm triggering her that way. So,
Sure. Sure. So you mentioned fillers and drainers previously. What are your fillers? Like what do you want to feel good in the marriage?
for me, I would just want to communicate better, intimacy better. Um, Communicator for sure.
Yeah. So your intimacy, like do you want emotional intimacy or sexual intimacy?
Well, both, as a matter of fact. I got to have emotional intimacy for me in order to have sexual intimacy. I found that out. Otherwise, and I think we're both stuck in that situation right now. We're not
Uh-huh.
connected, but we're not. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because that's one way to think about it also is, if there's all these like, tasks that I should be doing or could be doing for my marriage, it's nice to tie them back to your personal benefit, to tap into your own internal motivation. Because sometimes it can feel like, well, that's just kind of what my partner wants. Like they want to improve for this reason or that reason. And I kind of care, but I kind of don't. But if you can tie it back into like what you care about and what you want to see better and tie that into whatever task you're agreeing to do, sometimes that helps. So for example, let's say you don't care much about sharing power, so you really don't want to listen to an episode or a podcast about that, but you do care about how to get better emotionally closer. So you're like, hey, maybe I'll start initiating the head heart check because I know that's for emotional intimacy. So you want to kind of start with whatever you're naturally wanting to see better in the marriage for you, Patrick,
right,
because you're going to have a higher follow through rate if it's something that you're personally invested in
right.
compared to something you don't you kind of care about, but you kind of don't,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, the other thing too is, sometimes sometimes one partner wants their spouse to do majority of the initiating, but it doesn't sound like that's what I'm hearing here. It sounds like Dawn, for you, you just want Patrick to do his fair share, just like you've been doing your fair share of getting the marriage better.
Correct. I feel like I've been on a road all by myself,
Now,
changing
I'm sorry, go ahead.
changing it as it's presented to me if he's bored with something or he doesn't agree with a book, or we just keep changing it and then he sounds positive about it and then he stops.
So, Don, for you, when you ask him to do something, um, are you checking in first to see how he feels about it and if he also is motivated for it? Or is it more of like you make these recommendations that he should do?
I think we've talked about it. I don't think I've ever said you have to do this.
No suggestion. I want
Mhm.
me.
Yeah. And is the suggestion said as like, I think it'd be great if you did this? Or like, what's the kind of phrasing that's used, Don, when you're making the suggestions?
Oh, I've said it so many times over the years. I can't. I'm drawing a blank on that one.
Mm.
I know I would bring up, I heard like for your podcast and I said, wow, I listened to a new podcast and that sounded really interesting. You should give it a listen. Something to that effect. It's not like you need this today, but as he says, okay, I will. And then he
Uh-huh.
doesn't. Then I
Yeah, yeah,
say,
yeah.
did you get a chance? And he said, no, I'm too busy. Okay,
Yeah.
well, you probably, you know,
Uh-huh.
So,
So
Dr.
one,
White,
yeah,
basically,
go ahead.
it's the prioritize your wedding you had in the podcast, which was very helpful. My prioritizing our marriage is low. Everything else is higher than her, unfortunately. And I'll admit that she's at the bottom of the totem pole. I do other things around the house or doing other things other than being putting her as number one. So,
Yeah. And you're kind of struggling to put your finger on why that is.
correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, so a couple comments here before we keep going. Don, on your side, one little edit to consider is usually follow through is lowest when we make suggestions for our partner because they may or may not be motivated. And so the example you just provided, that may or may not be a good representation, but hey, I heard this new podcast, you should give it a listen. So it's making a suggestion, and sounds like you're married to someone who would probably rank high in agreeableness. That's the big five personality test, the big five, the Neo Big Five. And when you're high in agreeableness, you're a pleaser, and you kind of say whatever you think your partner wants to hear. and you go along with things. You stuff down what you're really feeling because you avoid conflict. And so I'm wondering if part of the dynamic is Dawn will make these suggestions because she's the researcher, and then Patrick just kind of says, "Yeah, good idea," just to kind of acquiesce without really any strong intent or commitment to actually doing whatever he's agreeing to. Kind of like the yes man, like just kind of saying yes
Mm-hmm.
to keep the peace on the surface.
Mm.
Yeah, and
Um,
I've learned that over the years. So now
what's that?
I've learned that over the years that he is like that, but I don't want to come off as like his boss that he has to do something.
Sure.
You know, I'll check in. Before I would just let it go and stuff down my feelings, and now I'll bring it up once a week. And
Yeah.
then it gotten to the point where, are you willing to let me go and leave by not doing this?
Yeah.
You know, all the
Yeah.
stuff's at the beginning as a suggestion, and we just keep there. Hear
Yeah.
what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. So it sounds like what I'm saying is consistent with what you guys have experienced, where Patrick tends to be high in agreeableness. He'll just kind of say what is going to keep you happy in the moment, and then there's that lack of follow through, and then Don, you get frustrated. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
frustrated
what?
and helpless.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one option, Don, on your side, if you make a suggestion in the future, is edit it to say something like this: "Hey, I just heard this new podcast. I found it really helpful. Um, would you be interested in sitting down and listening to it with me at some point?" And then see whatever Patrick says. He may be, "Yeah, sure, honey." And then you could say, "Okay, when should we sit down and listen to it together? When would be a good time?" And now you're kind of saying we instead of you, and it shifts it, right? So instead of you just saying, "Hey, you should XYZ," Patrick probably won't follow through, is what history is telling us here. But instead, if you're like, "Hey, I found this new podcast. I found it really interesting. Would you be interested in listening to it with me?" And then Patrick probably would say yes, because he's high in agreeableness. And then you would say, "Okay, when would be a good time that we could listen to it together?" So that does a few things. First of all, it's not telling Patrick what he needs to do. Like, "Hey, you should listen to this." And it's bringing it into the we, like, we should listen to this. When could we do it together? And now there's some accountability because now Patrick has to say, "How about tonight at 7?" or "How about tonight after dinner?" And
Mm.
then we're doing it together. So one of the best ways for follow through is you start doing these things together. When you're married to someone who struggles with follow through, it tends to not work very well to uh, ask them to do things on their own. It tends not to happen. And sometimes that's because of a lack of motivation. Sometimes it's because there might be some ADHD, undiagnosed or diagnosed, involved. And when there's ADHD, I'm not sure how much you know. I don't even know if that's going on here, but if there is ADHD,
Mm.
people who are on that spectrum of ADHD, they struggle with follow through in general. They struggle
Mm.
with procrastination. They struggle with consistent motivation. So even if there's not officially ADHD, it feels similar to ADHD. But usually that's an approach of, I'm gonna stop making suggestions for my partner to do on their own, and instead suggest things that we could do together, and then ask when, and then we sit down and do it at the same time together. So that could just be a little pivot. What do you
But
think, Don?
quick question on that. So then he says, okay, well, how about 7 o'clock tonight? And then 7 o'clock rolls around and he's mowing the lawn or he's doing something else. And I touch base and I say, are we still going to do that? And he says, yes, in a little bit. And then a little bit never happens.
Yeah, so you can approach that on a case by case basis, but you could also preempt that with, if he says, "Yeah, let's do it at 7 o'clock tonight," then you could say, "Okay, how should I respond, Patrick, if 7 o'clock comes and goes and you're not here to listen to it and you're doing something else?" And then let Patrick tell you what to do. And then Patrick may say, "Oh, well, if that happens, just, you have every right to get frustrated with me, and tell me, come get me, like, if I forget." Another approach, though, is you could say, "Okay, well, I don't want you to forget. So how about we both put timers on our phone? And so when 7 o'clock comes around, let's set an event. So then I don't have to be your reminder. Your phone is your reminder now."
Mhm.
Some
Okay.
people do that approach, so that can help. But the overall goal when you're married to someone who's forgetful, is you have to set up rhythms where we do rhythms together. and we set these events on our phone for like our nightly head heart check. So now I'm not like waiting for them to initiate because they'll probably forget.
Mm.
But the advantage, it sounds like, of Patrick is that he is routine oriented. He's just not good at developing the routine, especially if it's a little complicated. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm hearing.
No.
So it sounds like a solution potentially could be we need to develop these rhythms together, and let's develop some events on our shared calendar together. And so the reminders go off on both of our phones together. And then we get in the groove together doing this, whatever it is, fill in the blank. That's where the tools come in. Then after a while, it becomes our routine. So it's
I like
no more I'm waiting for Patrick to do it. No more I'm waiting for Don to do it. We are doing it together as a team. It becomes a routine.
I like it.
Yeah, and that's what kind of is lacking is she wants me to initiate each night, and the problem is I don't. So I
Yeah.
can't. I want to. It's just
You choose.
I
not.
choose not to. So
Uh-huh. And is that specific? Like you're supposed to initiate something specific at a specific time every night?
yeah, typically it's after dinner when we're relaxing. She's waiting for me to start the conversation about our feelings. So
Anything.
or
Okay.
anything. Yeah, anything.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Again,
And
that
when you
where when I grew up, we never did that. Up until recently, I haven't done that. My whole life, I haven't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So it's
a
kind of
little,
like asking you to pull out your toenails once a night after dinner.
yeah, it is. A good
Yeah.
analogy.
The other day you said to me you didn't feel comfortable not comfortable. You felt like anytime we sit down to talk about our feelings, what did you say?
It's a conflict.
You look at it as a conflict.
Conflict.
Okay. So a couple things there, right? So one is this is like your weakness, like you're being asked to initiate a weakness once a night, and so inevitably you're like, "Ooh, I feel some anxiety around it."
Yeah,
How many times do you actually forget to initiate it?
5 times, 5 times a week.
Do you
I'm-
Okay.
forget? Choose not.
I choose not to do it. It's just, it really makes me nervous.
Well, sure. I mean, I'm just curious, how many nights are you aware and you're thinking, "Oh, it's after dinner, it's my time, but I'm choosing not to," or
Every
how many nights do you just forget to initiate it because your mind's somewhere else?
I need to, but I just don't. So it's every night.
Okay.
It's a challenge for me.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing you could do, I mean, multiple things, but one edit you could do there, Patrick, is just speak to why you're avoiding it. Just say that at the minimum. You could say, I know I'm supposed to initiate our feelings talk, and I just feel really uncomfortable doing it. At the minimum, you could do that because at least that would show Dawn you're remembering. And so it's good actually to hear that you remember every night. Like forgetting is not really the issue, it sounds like.
No,
You
it's
also,
not.
okay. So every night when you know, like, oh crap, here's the time. She wants me to talk about my feelings. Here it comes. Just like say that out loud and say, I know I'm supposed to share my feelings right now, but I feel really uncomfortable. And so I can tell I'm avoiding it. Just saying that is a step, right? Because at least it would show Dawn like, oh wow, he's thinking about it. That right there is you sharing your feelings,
It is.
right? Because you just shared how you feel uncomfortable with something. And it's you initiating, you're communicating just by saying that. So that's a little edit you could do on your side right there too.
Right. No, that makes sense. That's a good suggestion.
The other thing is you guys sound like you need some training on the head heart check. Because when something is unfamiliar, it is intimidating, right? Especially if it's not your strong suit to begin with. You're like, what? How am I supposed to do that? But if you know how to do it and you get good at it, then that resistance will go down. And so it sounds like you guys probably need some training on like how do we even do, because what you're talking about is the head heart check.
Right.
How much training have you guys received already on the head heart check that I talked about, if any?
2 days we did it.
Oh, okay.
2 days, not training, but we started it
On our own.
on our own.
Okay.
Yeah.
No
Tell me
training.
what you Yeah. What do you understand about the head heart check so far? So I can fill in the gaps.
You can start
Okay.
because you were good at it. I'm not good at it. So,
Well, telling him what's on my head, the regular things like day-to-day things. If something happened with the kids or something happened at work, and that's really on my mind. And then the other one is what's on my heart, which it usually ends up to be the only 2 times we did it is the fact that we're not communicating and we're not getting along. So I share that that's on my heart.
Okay. Okay. So several edits here. Okay. So first of all, the purpose of the head heart check is to become better friends. Okay. Because we all have a lot going on inside of us. We have a lot of highs and lows, and we just don't talk about it. And then before long, you feel like your partner doesn't know you at all. And that's when you really start feeling lonely, right? For all of us. So the goal, the analogy that's used is a love map or a map of a city. So what's the biggest city you guys live next to?
outside of Detroit, Metro Detroit.
Okay. Yep. I have family in Lansing, Michigan, by the way. So I was raised right around that area, Ohio, Michigan, for
Yep.
part of my upbringing.
Yep.
Um, anyway, you would never go to Detroit with an outdated map because the map's always changing. New roads, new buildings, new bridges, and we're the same. So we're always changing, we're always evolving. So we need a method to stay connected, right? And the head heart check is designed for that. So it's just a simple way to daily stay updated and connected with your partner so you have a current map. That's the way to think about it. Okay. When you have an updated map, you're going to interpret your partner's behavior better also, because then you're going to understand like, oh, they're acting that way because of XYZ, right? They're probably feeling they're acting this way because I know they're feeling this about whatever, because you're gaining a lot of information. So your interpretations of your partner go way up. The accuracy of your interpretations go way up. It also, before we get into the details, it also gives you a lot of information to follow up with. So hypothetically, let's say Dawn is sharing how she just had a conflict with her sister or her friend, and she shares that in the head heart check. Then Patrick, the following day, you can follow up with that information. Like, hey, how's that conflict going with your friend? Any updates? Right? And vice versa. Let's say Patrick shares he's got, review with his boss coming up and he's really nervous about it and he hopes he gets good reviews and he's anxious. And then the next day, Dawn can follow up like, hey, how's your interview? Any updates on that? So that does two things. So when your partner starts to know what's going on inside of you and then they follow up and ask questions, it makes you feel known and cared for. And
She
that's really
that
powerful.
I don't do it.
Yeah. So the head heart check, there's a couple steps to it. Okay, the first step is a pre-step. Okay, this pre-step is to gather your thoughts on what you've been feeling from the day and why. And here's the big four. So write these down: mad, sad, glad, and fear. So you keep it real simple: mad, sad, glad, or fear. So you got to think, which of those have I been feeling today? You might have felt all four. You might have just felt one of them, maybe two of them. But you're thinking about which of these four feeling categories have I felt today, and then why? Why was I feeling that? Now, there's one ground rule here with the head heart check: is this cannot be about your partner. The head heart check has nothing to do with your marriage. And that's on purpose, because if you start sharing negative things you felt in the day about your partner, they're not going to want to do the head heart check anymore. And there's a second tool called the bullseye that you were supposed to do right after the head heart check, and that's all about the marriage. So that's why you can do the head heart check without any focus on the marriage. But that keeps it safe. So that means the head heart check is everything else in your life. Your friends, relationships, work, health, habits, like whatever else you want to talk about, sky is the limit. It just has nothing to do with us. Because if it does, I'm not going to want to do it. Okay. So that keeps it safer. And that's exactly what you guys just described. Right. So
Right.
yeah, you've experienced that. So that's why that ground rule is there, is to keep it safe. So that's the pre-step. Okay, what have I been feeling and why? Mad, sad, glad, or fear. and why. Now, most emotions fall into those categories. Another category might be shame, but those are the big four. So frustration, for example, would be under the mad category. Anxiety would be under the fear category. So those are, subcategories within that bigger category, but mad, sad, glad, or fear. You do that precept because a lot of us don't know what we've been feeling. Okay, it's a growth area. I've had to work on this in my marriage because my wife loves to talk about feelings, and it doesn't come natural to me either. Most guys, it's a growth area. Not all the time, but a lot of times it is. And that's why the precept is there, because a lot of us who don't live in our feelings, we have to take a moment and really think, like, what have I been feeling today? I'm not quite sure. So this precept you do by yourself. And it could take 30 seconds, it may take 5 minutes, but it's short, and you're just consolidating what have I been feeling today and why. Mad, sad, glad, or fear, and why. Okay. Once you're ready, you guys come together, put an event on your phone, on your calendar, so it goes off at the same time every night, and title that event Head Heart Check. So now it's not just up to either of you to remember. It's going off on both of your phones. You just need to agree of where we're going to meet to do it. Okay? And ideally it'd be in the same spot, so you get into a routine. So let's say it's on like a couch in the living room, like every night, 7 o'clock on the couch, and that's what you get into a routine. So now you're sitting down, and now you're just going to ask each other this one question. You take turns with this question. What's been on your head and heart today? And that's why it's nice to do this in the evening. Some couples do it in the morning, which can work as well. It just might be harder to remember stuff from the previous day, but whatever works for you guys, morning, noon, or evening for the head heart check. But you're just going to ask what's been on your head and heart. Now, when you respond to this, you've already consolidated, right? What you've been feeling from the day and why. So when you share, remember to share like a paper. And that just means I'm going to put the major feeling word first, and then the words underneath the title are the reasons why. So for example, if your spouse asks you, what's been on your head and heart today? You'd say, well, I was having a lot of anxiety, and here's all the reasons why. Or I was really frustrated today. Here's the reasons why. Or I was just felt really sad and kind of down a lot. Here's the reasons why. Right? So each of those examples, I start with the feeling word first, and then I explain why. So that's sharing like a paper, where the feeling word is the title, then under the title are the words explaining why. That's important just because it keeps it clean and organized when you're sharing. And as the listener, it makes it much easier to follow. Because a lot of people, when they share their feelings, it's going all over the place and it's hard to track.
That would be me.
Yeah. Yeah. So that could be your growth area, Don, is okay, I got to share like a paper. Right.
Right.
So you don't divide out head and heart. It's really just talking about what have you been feeling today and why. That's what you're sharing. Okay. So you don't divide it out.
Okay.
The other ground rule is the only thing you're allowed to respond with is empathy. You can't fix, you can't suggest, you can't solve. And that's also to keep it safe, because people either avoid the head heart check because they don't want their partner to say something negative about them, or they don't want to be fixed. And so this is the other ground rule. And so when your partner shares, like, yeah, today I had a lot of anxiety because I got in a conflict with my colleague at work and I just didn't know what to do and I feel really overwhelmed. When they're talking about that, all you can say in response is empathy. Okay. And let me give you a few empathy statements. So make sure you write these down. One is, that sucks. That's my favorite. 2 words. Really, really simple. Wow, that
He's gonna
sucks.
do that.
Yeah, that sucks. Another one is, that sounds fill in the blank. That sounds awful. That sounds overwhelming. That sounds so stressful. Okay, another one is, no wonder you feel fill in the blank. No wonder you feel anxious. No wonder you feel upset. No wonder you feel stressed. Another great one is, it makes sense that X would make you feel Y. It makes sense that X would make you feel Y. Now, when you're empathizing, the mistakes to avoid with empathy is don't say, I understand how you feel. Because your partner may say, no, you don't. You're not in my shoes. So avoid, I understand. People want to say, I understand when they're trying to empathize, and it's a mistake. The other mistake to avoid is trying to relate by sharing your own similar experience. Oh, you feel
Yeah,
anxious about that? Go ahead, Patrick.
yeah, I do that a lot.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Yeah, I got one better than you.
Uh-huh. That's how it can sound. And
Yeah,
you bring the focus of the conversation goes on you instead of staying
right.
on your partner.
Yeah,
Yeah. And there's a time and place for, resonating and sharing similar stories, but you want it to be the minority, not the majority. Yeah.
right.
So therefore, all you do is your partner shares, you respond empathy, and then you're silent. And you allow them to keep talking, keep sharing if they want to. And then you respond with empathy, and then you're silent. And so it's simple actually. And the simpler the better. People overcomplicate. But the combination of empathy and silence is really powerful. And if you're a fixer, are either of you fixers where you want to solve it?
Me.
Okay. Yep.
Mhm.
So remember, instead of trying to solve the presenting problem, I'm trying to solve my partner feeling alone in their problem, and I accomplish that through empathy. Okay. So that's the way I think about it. I'm still fixing. I'm just shifting the target. No longer is it the presenting concern I'm trying to fix. Trying to fix them feeling alone in that concern. Okay. If your partner asks you, what do you think I should do? Or if you're in my shoes, what would you do? Then green light. You can tell them what you would do. But unless they ask for your feedback, you're just saying those empathy statements I just gave you over and over and over with sincerity. Okay. One last tip with empathy is you got to really remember who's speaking to you. Because usually when your partner is venting, we see it from our lens, whatever the topic is they're talking about, and that's where we try to solve. But instead, you have to think about, okay, what are they saying? And who's speaking to me right now? What's my partner been through in life? What are their wounds? What have they been through? What are their values? What are their insecurities? What are their stress points? If I'm mindful of that information while they're speaking, empathy becomes a math problem where I'm slowly connecting the dots and I'm slowly understanding why they're feeling certain things because I'm putting it in the certain slots in my mind. And I'm thinking, oh, no wonder that's stressful for them. That goes against one of their values I know they have. Or oh, no wonder that's creating anxiety. I know that's one of their that's going against one of their big issues for security I know they have. So you're connecting the dots in your head. You're not saying that out loud. And that means that makes empathy into a math problem. You're just connecting the dots. Okay, that's how you empathize.
Mm.
So that's all it is. So you do a pre-step, you both do the pre-step, you sit down at the same time every night. So you get in a routine. You take turns saying what's been on your head and heart. Then your partner says, yeah, I was feeling anxious because of this and this, or I was feeling frustrated because of this or this. Then your partner empathizes, like, oh, wow, that sounds horrible. Or no wonder you would feel X, or it makes sense you would feel this because of this. And then you just take turns. And then the other partner goes. And if you do that, the head heart check probably will only take about 10 minutes, 10 to 15. And you can even start out with it being 5 minutes because you want it to feel simple. You want it to feel manageable, or you'll avoid it like you've been experiencing.
Hmm.
Right.
Um, what questions do you guys have hearing me describe it, or comments?
After we do the head heart check, then do we just go back to our normal schedule of life? Or should we do anything else that you have available?
There's actually three things that I recommend couples do back to back to back. We don't have time to get in the other two, but you
Right.
can search around on my website or for the podcast episodes. The second thing you would do is called the bullseye. The third thing you would do is called nuddle time.
Okay.
Okay. But I wouldn't worry about those right now. Like, worry about just establishing one routine. And that's really simple. That's just 5 minutes. And do that long enough where it becomes a routine for your marriage, where you do it every night. You don't even think about it. It's just a part of what we do. When you get to that level, now you're ready to add a second routine to it. Because this is also why routines don't stick, because people try to do too many all at once, and then they don't do any of them. Yeah. But eventually, there's the bullseye would come second, nuddle time would come third. And then total, it takes around 30 minutes. But for now, I would just say, let's just hone in on this one routine, really focus in on it. And then once you get really good at it and it's a part of your DNA in your marriage, then you can think about adding the second one.
I like it.
Okay, good. What do you like about it, Dawn?
Makes it a lot simpler, and I think that it would be very easy for Pat to do that instead of worry and become anxious about everything. And so he's more apt to do it.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think, Patrick?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a challenge to me, so that's good. Doesn't sound like we're going to get into it about deep feelings, or it sounds simple. Simple.
Yes.
It's a starting point is what it is.
That's right. That's right. And try to stick with those ground rules and the guidelines I just gave you guys so it doesn't morph into something more complicated. Because you want it to feel simple. You want it to feel manageable. And research supports that too. When goals feel too difficult, motivation goes down.
Right.
And so you want something to feel moderate in difficulty. Like, okay, I think I could get my head around that. That doesn't sound too bad, because that's going to optimize the internal motivation. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have your phones handy right now?
Yeah,
we're on mine. Where's yours?
Mine are put away because I get distracted too much.
Okay. Yeah. So I would encourage you guys, once we hang up here, pull out your phones. And are your calendars synced at all on your phones?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So if you can try to sync your calendars together. You can even create like a separate calendar and sync it just for your marriage, like your marriage calendar. And then create an event for the head heart check that's automatically synced with both your calendars, and then decide what time should we do this every day. Put that into that event, label it head heart check, and then have some reminders and alerts going off. So both of your phones now serve as the reminder, not your partner.
I like it a lot.
So that really helps, because then we're on the same page. We both know what's going on, when it's supposed to go on, and then it's just a matter of time to get into the routine. So,
right.
Okay, guys, any final comments or questions?
How do we become your patient?
Yeah, for a follow-up, you can send me an email if you would like to follow up and work together further. Do you guys know my email already?
I do, yes.
Okay. Yeah, you always can reach out that way if you want further support down the road.
Okay.
But I appreciate you participating in this, and hopefully you found a thing or two helpful.
It was great.
We do. And we enjoy your podcast very much.
Good. Glad to hear it. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Good. All right, guys. Enjoy your head heart check tonight. Make sure you start it tonight.
All right.
Yeah, let me know how it goes, and I'll talk to you later. Thank you for listening to the Dr. Wyatt Show. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to leave a comment if you're on YouTube, or leave a review if you're listening to this as a podcast episode. If you want me to give you a free marriage counseling session for the podcast, for the show, be sure to send me an email to info@drwyattfisher.com. That's info@drwyattfisher.com. And if you want to take your marriage to the next level, join my Marriage Saver Society. It's my leading digital course so that you can learn my top skills and tools from the comfort of your living room at your own pace. To learn more, check the link in the description. And remember, your marriage is alive. If you care for it and nurture it, it will grow. But if you deprive it and neglect it, it will wilt and die. The choice is up to you. Take care.